So we're going to compute depreciation for straight line, double declining balance, and units of production method for this particular truck. So let's start with straight line. What is the formula for straight line? Cost minus salvage value divided by the useful life, or the life in years. So what is it for this particular truck? It costs $60,000. We have a salvage of 4 and a useful life of 7. So we would take the $56,000 divided by 7 and get $8,000 per year. So the depreciation expense in year 1 would be $8,000, and in year 2 it would be $8,000. Just to get a visual, how would that look on the balance sheet? So here we would have the cost recorded. We would have accumulated depreciation in year 1 being $8,000, and then in year 2 another $8,000 is being added, and here's the book value at the end of the 2 years. So the second question was, at the end of year 2, if Plower sold the truck for $45,000, what's the gain or loss on sale? What do you think? So what would we compare? We would compare the 44 to the 45, and that difference is $1,000 in our favor, right? We got 45 and gave up 44. That gives us $1,000 gain. Let's move on now to double declining balance. So the formula for double declining balance is quite a bit different than straight line. It's book value times 2 divided by useful life. Notice that we don't use salvage value. It is ignored for double declining balance. And there's a great tendency for students to keep wanting to use salvage value because they used it in straight line and they use it for units of production. But this method ignores it. You depreciate down to salvage and then you stop. But the calculation of depreciation expense ignores salvage. Alright, let's compute that for the asset we have here. For year 1, book value would be $60,000 because it's book value at the beginning of the year, and in year 1 there is no accumulated depreciation yet because we haven't booked any depreciation expense. But at the end of year 1, when you book the first year of depreciation expense, this is the calculation. So book value, which would be $60,000 minus 0, so that's $60,000 times 2 over the useful life. Our useful life is 7 years. So that's $60,000 times 2 divided by 7, and we get the $17,143. Now for year 2, we would take the book value at the beginning of year 2, which would be the $60,000 minus the 17, and we use that. So here we have year 2, the $60,000 minus year 1's depreciation times 2 over 7. And if there was a year 3, it would be $60,000 minus the 17 minus the 12 times 2/7. So what does the balance sheet look like for this asset? So we have cost in year 1 and year 2, and accumulated depreciation for year 1 and year 2. Now where did that $29,388 come from? That's the $17,143 plus the $12,245. So in year 2 we would add to what was already there. It's accumulated depreciation. So all depreciation since inception of the asset, since you got it. Now what will it look like if we sell the truck for $45,000 at the end of year 2? We would compare the $45,000 that we got to the $30,612 book value that we gave up, and we'd have a gain of $14,388. Okay, let's move on to units of production method. Units of production method, sometimes called the activity method, is very similar to straight line. The numerator is cost minus salvage, which is the same as straight line. But the denominator, instead of useful life, is productive units, the life in units. So the life in miles, or the life in pounds of salt, or the life in gallons of oil. So for this particular truck, the unit of measure is miles. So let's calculate year 1. So the numerator again is the cost minus the salvage, $56,000, and the denominator is the number of miles in the life of the truck. So we get 28 cents per mile, and so we now use that per mile depreciation cost and come up with the calculation of depreciation expense for year 1 and year 2. Now this method, you cannot forecast depreciation expense in every year of the asset when you first get it. Whereas in straight line and double declining balance, you can tell what the depreciation will be in each year when you get it. But this particular method relies on knowing how many miles were ridden in each year, and you can't know that in advance. You have to wait until the year is finished. Okay, so let's calculate it. So the number of years that were ridden, 12,000 in year 1 times the rate of 28 cents a mile gives you 3,360. In year 2, you drove 40,000 times the rate of 28 cents per mile gives you 11,200. So what does the balance sheet look like for this asset? So again, the asset's cost is still 60,000, but year 1 depreciation 3,360 is then put in accumulated when we debit the expense and credit accumulated, and then in the second year when we debit the expense, it gets added to the 3,000. So that 14,560 is both the 3,360 and the 11,200 added together, giving us the book value at the end of year 2. So now if we sell the asset for 45,000 at the end of year 2, what will it look like? Will we have a gain or loss? So here we have a loss on the sale of equipment because what we received was lower than the book value. So we received 45 but gave up 45 for 40, giving us a loss.